Hello everybody and welcome to today's video. I am enormously happy to say that I get to talk about Akiba's trip Hellbound and Debriefed today. This is a game that is a remake of Akiba's Trip Plus, which was a PSP title that was released in Japan, and it was only originally released in Japan. We didn't get to play that original. This remake is obviously getting a release worldwide, and it will come out on PlayStation 4, Nintendo Switch and PC later on this month, I believe. This is a preview stage. I've had the chance to play a couple of hours of the game and get my feet wet with it, and I do really enjoy it. I am a fan of the other Akiba's Trips that I have played. It is a very small series, but I have enjoyed the concept. I have enjoyed the way that they've gone about it. I've enjoyed the narrative, the design and all of that. And I think one of the points that I want to make up front is that this game is actually a lot smarter than it is going to get credit for. A lot of people are going to see Akiba's Trip, they're going to see the fan service, and they're just going to dismiss the game as that. That is all it is going to be to them. I think there is more to it than that. There is fan service, it is presented in a satirical way, and it is making a commentary with that satire, and it just is a lot more relevant to Japanese culture and the community than I think a lot of people are going to give it credit for. It kind of, as a satire, it participates in a conversation that is worth having. We'll get to that in a moment, but first I will talk about what this game is actually like to play. Now, if you haven't played Akiba's Trip before, then they are action RPGs of a sort, and they almost work like a parody, a very cheap parody, but a parody nonetheless of the Yakuza series. Now, I want to say up front that this is a PSP game that has been remade. You can no doubt see it from the footage that you're seeing on the screen in front of you, but it does look like it is a PSP game that has just been spruced up to get a re-release on other consoles. There are certainly other remakes that have been far more gorgeous in design. This one is done on the cheap, and I don't necessarily mean that in a bad way. I have enjoyed playing this game, but I do think that immediately people are going to also look at it and say this looks a little bit primitive. It also plays a little bit primitive. They haven't updated the AI really for the modern generation, so there are all kinds of PSP quirks in there, which don't bother me personally, but I do need to make it up front clear that this game probably won't be winning Game of the Year awards. That doesn't mean by any means it's not enjoyable. I am really enjoying it. I think that I personally will probably be giving it a pretty positive score unless things go really south after this preview stage, but I do think that there are going to be a lot of people that look at how simple it all looks and dismiss it on that basis, beyond and above and beyond the fan service side of things as well. So in terms of how it plays, in Akiba's Trip you wander around Akihabara and your job is to identify and defeat vampires. Now these vampires have a quirk in that their hands and face and legs, if they're women wearing shorts or a skirt, are actually immune to the sun damage. So you need to find other ways to identify them because they can conceal themselves in human society. You do that with a special camera which turns the vampires invisible. So you need to wander around Akihabara taking photos of various people, and if they don't show up on the camera, you then need to beat them up because they are a vampire. When you have finished beating them up, which takes place in this kind of action combat system, which is where the kind of the Yakuza joke comes in. It plays like a very cheap version of Yakuza, I think quite deliberately. Once you finish beating them up, you can then tear their clothes off, and you tear three parts of their clothes off. You tear their shirt off, you tear their pants off or their skirt off, and you tear their glasses off if they're wearing glasses. Once you've done that, their body is now exposed to the sunlight and they disappear and you've defeated them. So you need to wander around Akihabara doing that to all kinds of different characters. Pretty much every denizen that you would expect to see in Akihabara is there, from pop idols to rock music people to nerds to tourists and schoolgirls and maids and everybody else. And some of every type of these characters are vampires that need to get stripped. And that's where the title comes from. If you say it fast enough, that's where this title of this game comes from. It's part of the joke. And the thing is that, like I said earlier in the video, that is actually quite relevant to Japan in an odd way. So in Japan, there is a group of people called hikikomori. They are shut-ins. And there are a lot of them. There is something like 700,000 at last estimate. And they're a concern for the Japanese culture because by being shut-ins, they're not really participating in their culture. A lot of them have quite high-paying jobs because As we all know, thanks to COVID, it is very easy to work from home in a lot of jobs these days. So a lot of them do have good jobs, but because they're not out there participating in society, there is all kinds of concerns about what that means to Japanese society. You take 700,000 people across the country out of it, and even though Japan has a big population, that is a lot of people that are just not doing the normal things that you would expect from people in a society. That's a full-size city in itself of people that are kind of separate and feeling ostracized from the community that they belong in. So across the social, cultural, economic sphere, there is an increasing concern about what those hikikomori mean to Japanese culture. Akiba's trip is a bit of a satire on that. It's not a nasty satire by any means, but it certainly plays on that kind of culture. These vampires, when they attack a human, if they successfully do so, they turn that human into a hikikomori. They disappear off to their homes and kind of never get seen again, not because they're dead or anything, but simply because they become shut-ins. So the vampirism in this game is associated with the forces that cause people to become hikikomori, and that becomes a kind of core concept of it. You want to stop people from kind of becoming shut-ins by defeating this vampire threat. But of course, you end up allying yourself with a government agency which is less than noble itself right from the start. You can tell that. So you do get to make some pretty tough decisions about who you end up aligning with and where your sympathies end up lying. I haven't got to any of that yet because I'm still in preview stage, but it's all obviously there, and that's a big part of the game's story. As far as the satire goes, because it is set in Akihabara and because it does do a pretty good job of representing the various subcultures that hang out in Akihabara, there is that real tone of satire that runs throughout the whole game. It's not meant to be taken too seriously in that it's not an essay on what it is to be hikikomori, but it is certainly playing on that in a way that is quite light in tone and fits with, the fan service and everything else that's in the game. The other thing that I really love about Akiba's trip right up front is its depiction of Akihabara itself. Now, the game does split Akihabara down into these very small, tiny sections. They're not more than a couple of meters to explore because it was originally a PSP game, of course. But within the context of it being a PSP game, this is a genuine effort to recreate the Akihabara of 2011. And for anybody who has spent time in Akihabara, there will be a lot of locations that are immediately familiar. All the shops that you visit are shops that actually are in Akihabara, or at least were, and it's just a very good, authentic, if primitive, recreation of the town and its various colours and lights and energy. So, as somebody who has taken a lot of time in Akihabara, every time I go to Japan, I visit there, but haven't been able to be there for the past 18 months thanks to COVID, I have really enjoyed exploring this little recreation of the town and reminding myself of a city that I am pretty familiar with at this point. Of course, I don't know if any of this is still around. I believe that Akihabara was hit pretty hard by COVID lockdowns, or not that Japan had many lockdowns, but COVID restrictions, meaning that there were less tourists around and it was a town that really relied on tourism. But whatever's still left there, I'm looking forward to checking out once I get back into the city. For now, I'm just feeling a little bit homesick from playing through this game and being reminded of all the shops that I'd like to explore and buy stuff from, and all the various interesting locations and stores that Akihabara at least used to house. I don't have too much more to say about the game at this stage. I am really enjoying my time with it and the couple of hours I've had to preview it, but then I am also kind of the audience for this game. If you go into it expecting this grand blockbuster thing, you're going to come away pretty disappointed, of course. But if you go into it with the understanding of where it came from, of the series it belongs to, and you can buy into its sense of humour, which is both subcultural and fairly risque at times, if you can get along with all of that stuff, then I think that this one is going to be a fun little thing for you to enjoy. I am going to have a full review up on digitallydownloaded.net, of course, once embargo lifts. But in the meantime, do let me know your thoughts if you've played any of the other Akiba's trips and you're looking forward to giving this one a go. Drop me a note in the comments. Please do click that like and subscribe button if you enjoyed this video, because I probably will do another one on Akiba's trip at some point, and You wouldn't want to miss that. If you do enjoy the work that I do, then please consider backing me on Patreon. You can do so for as little as $1 a month or more if you're feeling generous. And by doing so, you will continue to help me to grow this channel. And Patreon backers also get a digital magazine each month, which is 48 pages of Japanese games and culture goodness. I talk about films and anime and books and travel and everything else to do with Japan in that magazine. That's a bonus for Patreon backers, all for $1 a month. Other than that, thank you very much for watching, and we will see you at the next video.